So what do you fear? What are you afraid of? If you ask a five-year-old that question, the five-year-old would probably say, I'm scared of the dark, I'm scared of broccoli, I'm scared of the boogeyman, right? The five-year-old, we kind of know what a five-year-old would say. If you ask a senior in high school, what do you fear? What are you afraid of? Right? The senior in high school would give you a list of what they're afraid of. If you ask a new mom, hey, well, what are you afraid of? What do you fear, right? How would she respond if you're newly married and someone asks you that question? What do you fear, right? There's a set of responses. If you're close to retirement, what do you fear, right? Here's the thing we all get, no matter how old we are, we all get that, well, we all get this emotion of fear, don't we? And fear is an interesting emotion. Now, fear, in the kind of the simplest of the clinical definitions of fear is something identifiable, right? That you can see in front of you that could cause you harm. And that just basic emotion has kept humanity alive for thousands and thousands of years, right? We all know that. This summer, I'm sitting on my back porch, which is elevated, and I hear this rumbling, and up over the back hill comes a bear. I was fearful. Why? I've watched videos on YouTube. Bears can climb. They're agile creatures. And this bear came over the hill. I'm sitting up on my porch looking down on that bear. That bear looked up to me, licked his chops, and it was like lunch. Right? Like, there's fear. I watched a video this week. A guy up in Alaska, and he had a camera that kind of looked over his backyard, and he was just walking out, taking his trash to this back shed. And you just see him. You see him walk out, he has his boots on, he makes his way to the shed, he opens his shed doors, he disappears into the shed to put his trash in trash cans. And as he was coming out, his back was to the camera. And right off to the edge of the camera, you saw this movement. And the guy starts to turn around as he's shutting the shed doors. And this massive bull moose is walking right towards him. And it was hilarious because he did one of these and went right back in the shed, right? Like, he didn't pause, right? He's like, I'm just not messing with that. And he stayed in there until that moose left, right? There's basic humanity that we all know, that feeling of fear. And fear is built into all of us. And again, it's kept people alive. It's that feeling when you stand on a bridge and you look over the bridge and you don't want to lean too far over. Why? Because you know that if you fall over, right, you would die, right? That fear has kept people alive. That fear is all part of our fight and flight response. And physically and emotionally, fear has an impact, right? When you face something scary, like that bear who looked at me and said, lunch, my heart raced. Blood vessels constricted, hyper-focused, right? My entire body went into this, okay. I got to make sure I get to safety, right? That keeps you safe. And that is just hardwired into all of us. But our fight and flight response when it comes to fear, which is identifiable, is only in short bursts. That's why it doesn't have a big impact. It happens, it hits, we see that identifiable object that gets us fearful, right? And it creates a response, and then once it's over, it's done. But what's interesting is mankind has grown. All of our identifiable fears are pretty small, aren't they? When we think about it over the course of time. But now, well, there's a cousin to fear. And that cousin is anxiety. And the simplistic definition of anxiety, well, it's just the opposite of fear. Fear is an identifiable object, right, that makes you fearful. But anxiety is an unidentifiable object, right? It's something that you're like, it might be there. But anxiety has the same physical and emotional response as fear. Anxiety has the same response. And anxiety can be summed up, if not all, most, of all of our worry, our anxiety is summed up in this two-word phrase, this two-word question. What if? What if? Isn't that our worry, our anxiety? What if? What if she doesn't like me? What if he doesn't like me? What if she leaves me? What if he leaves me? What if the medical report comes back? What if financially I can't make it next month, the month after? What if my paycheck doesn't equal? What if the bills come in? What if my company closes down? What if I change jobs? What if that relationship ends? What if? Think about all the what ifs. Think about all the what ifs. What ifs are consuming your thought process right now? What was the what if right when you woke up this morning? Maybe you're brushing your teeth and mentally all you're thinking about the what if. You know your what if. Driving to church, whatever campus you're driving to. What if just consumed your thinking? Maybe someone looked at you and said, hey, what are you thinking about? And you're like, oh, nothing. I was just thinking, nothing. But you know what you're thinking about. Right before you logged in online, you're sitting there, reading something, looking at something, and the what if just consuming your mind. And remember, what if has the same impact as that bear that looked at me and said lunch. Same impact. The difference is when we encounter identifiable fear, right, it hits and then it stops. But what ifs consume our thinking daily, hourly, by the minute, by the second. And it's wreaking havoc in your life. It's wreaking havoc in my life. Last week we answered this question. Who or what is the biggest obstacle in your path? And we simply answered it by saying you are. That you're the biggest obstacle in your path. I'm the biggest obstacle in my path. We as human beings, right, we like to blame everyone else. We are experts, right? We want to point the finger at everyone else. We just do. Maybe last week, right, you're like, okay, I know I am. And then quickly you just started pointing the finger to everyone else. Yeah, I know I am my biggest obstacle, but if she wasn't in my life, if he wasn't in my life, right, then I wouldn't be, right? It's so easy to do, but in all reality, we can't control anyone else. All we can do is control us. And that's especially the case for this emotion, this worry, this anxiety, that we have to realize that we are our own worst enemy, especially when it comes to this. Because no one else is thinking for us, are they? No one else can control our thoughts, can they? And Jesus understood this. Jesus completely understood that fear, worry, anxiety would have the greatest impact on individual people's lives. It's why Jesus over and over and over again came back to this one subject matter. Over and over again, not only did he teach about it, he actually kind of created scenarios so he could teach more about it. At the very beginning of his public ministry, Matthew records for us Jesus' longest teaching, Matthew 5, chapters 5, 6, and 7. And in this really lengthy sermon where Jesus hits on these big issues, one of those issues is all around worry. And Jesus simply says, do not worry, which, on the surface, like, yeah, we shouldn't worry, but guess what we all do? We all worry. We all are consumed with the what ifs of tomorrow, aren't we? And Jesus just says, don't worry. And then he's going to set up a framework around what he means by do not worry. He asks the question, he goes, can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And all of us would say, yeah, this is impossible. No, we could never add a single hour to our life. In fact, worrying, the what ifs of tomorrow, right? Worrying actually shortens lifespans because of the impact, emotionally and physically, that worry, anxiety has on our physical bodies. He goes on and he goes, therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. That are what ifs. All of our what ifs, right? When we think about the what ifs, that the worry that surround those what ifs, the worry, actually begins to thrive as we focus in on all the what ifs of tomorrow. That the breeding ground for worry is all of our what ifs. All of our what ifs. And those, not only can they add an hour onto our lives, which they can't. Actually, worry and anxiety shortens all of our life spans. And so as we're looking at this series, All In, how to have the best year ever, Jesus said, hey, focus on today. Focus on today. Every time your mind wants to lead to a worry of tomorrow, you got to bring it back to today. Every time your mind wants to think about the what ifs of the impact of tomorrow, the day after, the day after, the day after, the day after, Jesus kept on just saying, no. But today. You can worry about things today. The guardrails is today. Anything else beyond today, don't focus on. You got to keep it. You got to keep it honed and locked in for today. It's okay to worry if it's tethered to this day. And then guess what? Tomorrow, when you wake up, Jesus says, worry about that. But you can't worry about that until you wake up tomorrow. A short time after he had this teaching, Jesus and his 12 disciples, well, they got into a boat. And I think about this moment. It was the Sea of Galilee they were on. Sometimes they call the Sea of Galilee a lake. And Jesus grabs the 12 that he had handpicked, and he's like, hey, we're going to go out on the lake. Some of the disciples were avid fishermen. They'd grown up fishing on this lake. They'd grown up sailing on this lake. Some of them, this is all they knew. And Jesus grabs them, and I think it's interesting that Matthew, who's telling us the story, Matthew is one of the disciples. So Matthew was there. Now, Matthew's telling the story years later, but again, remember, he lived through this moment. If you grew up in church, you know where this story's going. If you grew up in church, you know the ending of the story. So I'm just going to ask you for the next few minutes, just don't relegate this story to a children's story, because I think it does such a great disservice to this moment. So they're all in a boat together. And Matthew tells us that this furious storm, this great mighty storm, rises up. Picture this moment. They're in the middle of this great lake, and the waves are crashing over the boat. They're in the middle of this great lake, and the winds are howling. The rain is coming in sideways. It's pelting the side of their face. Or they're in this boat, and they could hear the wood of the boat creak, and they're thinking to themselves, will this wood hold together? Will this boat hold together? They're trying to find the shore on the horizon, and they can't even see it because of the rain and the wind. They're trying to make their way to the direction where they think the shore is, but the boat's not making any ground because, again, it's just getting beaten by the waves. They're in the midst of a terrifying moment. I don't know if you've ever been on a lake during a storm like that. I have. My brother-in-law grew up having boats, and all of his adult life he had boats, and we were living in Vegas, and Troy and my sister and Michelle and their whole family came for vacation. He brought his boat, and I was so excited. And we went out on Lake Mead in Vegas, and it was a beautiful day. Sun was out. It is Vegas. It's sunny most of the time, just like Pennsylvania, sunny most of the time. And we were out on the lake, and all of a sudden, as Troy and I were talking, we were out there hours. Just enjoying the beautiful day. And we looked over the mountain ridge, and we could see the storm forming. And we both kind of thought it was just going to hug the mountain ridge, and it would just stay there, not come over. But we kept watching. We kept on watching, and all of a sudden, something shifted. It started coming with a fury, a force, and a pace. I saw my brother-in-law, he started to turn white, like every shade of white, because he realized it was coming. The waves were kicking up, and his boat, it was a nice boat, but that lake, like this, the waves are crashing in. He's trying to get us positioned to go back into dock. He's trying to fight the waves. All of us, the kids, everyone were holding on. This boat is hitting the waves. You could hear the boat creak underneath the impact of the waves. And all of us had one thought: are we going to make it back to shore alive? I will never forget, we made it back, and we got out of that boat, and I'm on dry ground. I'm like, oh, I love dry ground. Right? It's one of those moments. And the disciples, some who were seasoned fishermen, terrified. And what was Jesus doing? He was sleeping. Sleeping. Now, I don't know if this was like snoring sleeping. Some of you are married to the snoring sleeping person. I don't know if he was like completely out. I don't know if he was taking a little cat nap. I kind of think, and you can't find this in the text, but I think, or I wonder, maybe that's a better way. I wonder if Jesus wasn't just kind of like faking it, right? Like, I'm just going to keep my eyes closed and act like I'm sleeping. Matthew tells us he was sleeping. And the disciples come to Jesus, and they woke him and said, Lord, save us. Save us. Seasoned fishermen, save us. We're going to drown. Our life is going to end. It's all going to come crashing, and like, Jesus, you got to do something. And then Jesus asked one of the most ridiculous questions. You have little faith, why are you so afraid? I think Matthew kind of looked at Peter. Peter looked over at John. They all kind of made eye contact and said, seriously, Jesus? Look around you. You see the rain. Seriously, Jesus. Do you hear the boat creak? Seriously, Jesus. Can you see the shore? We can't see the shore. Jesus, we're soaking wet. Jesus, you're soaking wet. Why do you think we're afraid? Well, Jesus, just come up with a hypothesis right now. Help us out. Why do you think we're afraid? I think the disciples were beyond themselves, going, seriously? And then Jesus got up, stood up, soaking wet. The waves still crashing into the side of the boat, crashing over the side of the boat. Jesus got up with the wind howling and the rain pelting him. And he rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The entire storm and lake. Just whew. And the disciples were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. See, Peter, another one of the disciples who was there, he told this story. You find the story in the Gospel of Mark. A guy named John Mark actually wrote the Gospel of Mark. And what's so interesting is Peter, Peter told John what to write. He told the stories, and John wrote the story. And remember, again, Peter was there. And Peter tells the same story. And this is what Peter says. They were terrified and asked each other, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Matthew said that they were amazed. They were in awe. Peter goes, yeah, we were amazed, but we were also terrified. We were in awe, and part of that is we were terrified. And when you take this phrase, they were terrified, the literal translation of that phrase is they feared a great fear. Such a great phrase. They feared a great fear. So you got to tear that apart. What does that mean? Well, their fear of what? Their fear of what? Which was the storm, right? Was replaced by the fear of who? Jesus. They were in fear of the storm. It's why they woke Jesus up, thinking Jesus would maybe have a solution. And also when the storm died and the lake was calm, immediately they realized that they had to transfer their fear from the what to the who. That the presence of Jesus overshadowed the power of the storm. That Jesus' presence was a game changer. It was a game changer. A while later, Jesus gathered the disciples together, and he was going to send them out to start ministering and teaching and going into all of these different local communities. And he looks at the disciples and he's preparing them to go out. And he goes, hey, it's going to be like sheep among wolves. And this is such a great, disgusting image, because they would all have known what it would have been like to walk upon a sheep or a herd of sheep where a pack of wolves would have encroached on and devoured the sheep, right? They knew this image. Red fur everywhere, a hoof here, another hoof there. Just barely the remnants of the sheep. Jesus is like, hey, so you know, when you go out, you're going to be like sheep amongst wolves. And I'm sure all of them were like, yay. He went on to say, hey, you're going to be persecuted because of me. You're going to be beaten because of me. People are going to hate you because of me. So thanks for signing up. And then, like, it couldn't get worse. And then Jesus starts to kind of turn this corner. He's going to say something very heavy, and then he's just going to breathe life. He says, do not be afraid. And they're all like, yeah, thanks a lot, Jesus. We're like sheep amongst wolves. Do not be afraid. Thank you. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. And Jesus is like, hey, you're so concerned. You're so consumed. You're so focused on things on this earth. There's something eternal. And how much time do you spend on the eternal things from the earthly things? How much time do you think about something that's going to last forever compared to what is only going to be temporary? I mean, think about that for you. What about your what ifs? How many of your what ifs are tethered to eternity compared to what's tethered here? And if you're like me, 99.9999%, and let's just round up, are tethered temporal, not eternal. And Jesus is like, hey, your body can die. But the soul, rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. And again, this is like, whew, Jesus just jumped in the deep end of the pool. He's like, hey, how much time are you focused on eternity compared to how much time you focus on the earthly? And then Jesus said, you know these sparrows? And you sell them for like a penny? I mean, a penny 2,000 years ago, a penny today. We all get that image, right? I mean, some of you, a few of you, if you saw a penny on the ground, you'd pick it up. A few of you. All of you had a grandma that would pick up a penny up from the ground. Most of us, we see a penny, and it just depends on the day. You're like, I'm not sure. That's a whole lot of exercise to bend over and do a toe touch to get a penny. But we all know the value of a penny. And Jesus goes, hey, the sparrows, right? 2 sparrows are sold for a penny, meaning they're worthless. They're insignificant. Who cares about them? He goes, well, yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside of your Father's care. Like, God even knows what you think is worthless. God knows everything about that. What you think is insignificant, God knows everything about it. Then Jesus looks at his disciples and said, and the hair on your head, God has them numbered. Some of you, it's a lot easier for God to number the hairs lacking on your head. But Jesus is like, hey, God knows. Hair, insignificant. Hair is growing and falling out all the time. We don't even know. God, he knows. He goes, so don't be afraid. When you go out and the wolves are going to pounce on you like sheep, they're going to tear you apart, People are going to hate you. People are going to talk about you. People are going to despise you. People are going to try to do everything to come after you. Hey, disciples, when you go out, just know, don't be afraid. You're worth everything to God. Everything. That's why you have to go back to part 1, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, right? For you are God's workmanship. You are God's masterpiece. When you name Jesus the subject of your life, right? You're created brand new in Jesus. You're a blank canvas. You're a block of marble that God is going to start chiseling out for purpose, great works. Great works. Loving people by serving people to Jesus. She's like, you're worth everything. If a sparrow is worth everything to God, just think about your worth. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. A while later, Jesus is teaching to thousands and thousands of people. He's teaching, all of a sudden you realize the day's been long and the people are hungry. And Jesus is like, hey, we got to feed them. And the disciples are like, Jesus, we can't feed them. There are thousands of people. And again, some of you were raised in the church and you've heard this story and you just relegate it to a kid's story, but it's so much more than a kid's story. The disciples were like, hey, send them home. And Jesus is like, no, we're not going to send them home. We're going to feed them. The disciples are like, that's stupid, Jesus. How are we going to feed them? Jesus is like, hey, watch me. All of a sudden, a boy with a lunch. And Jesus is like, that's all I need. And Matthew, who was there? Who was there? Peter, who was there? John, who were there? Right? Like, Matthew's telling this story. He's like, yeah. We were like, send them home, Jesus. Jesus is like, no. I got a boy's lunch. And then the disciples found themselves, right? Jesus is like, hey, this is enough food for everyone. And again, put yourself in this picture. They're all sitting there going, Jesus, one boy's lunch, thousands of people. One boy's lunch, thousands of people. And Jesus said, go feed people. It's why whoing requires doing. It's why becoming who God has created you to be requires following, requires doing. Not sitting, not consuming, but moving your faith into action. I'm just telling you, you want your Christian faith to grow. It has to go into action. This is not Chris Sarthaway's framework. I'm just telling you, Jesus created scenario after scenario after scenario to move people into action. It's why whoing requires doing. It's why the disciples stood there looking at Jesus going, Jesus is really this one boy's lunch. We haven't counted everyone, but there's thousands of people. And then all of a sudden Jesus said, go feed them. And guess what happened? They went and started feeding them. And I just imagine this moment. I mean, they're spreading out amongst the crowd, and they're feeding people, and they're looking down, and they know what they started with, and they're feeding people, and people are asking for seconds, and they're like, we don't have enough. Okay, fine, take seconds, right? And all of a sudden, like, Matthew gets Peter's eye contact, right? And he's like, are you running out? No, I'm not running out. I'm not running out either. Hey, John, you running out? No, I'm not running out. No. Andrew, you running out? No, I'm not running out. No one's running out? We're not running out. Okay, we'll keep feeding people. Imagine when they get done and now they have leftovers. And Jesus is like, yeah. I mean, the disciples had to be on this all-time spiritual high. I mean, they were part of the miracle. But what happens next? That's why we can't relegate this to a kid's story. At the end of the day, the sun is starting to set. Matthew tells us that Jesus made the disciples get into the boat. Made. Forced, coerced. Picture this moment. Jesus is like, hey, get in the boat, go on the other side of the lake. And they're all like, nope. Jesus is like, go get in the boat. And they're like, no, we're not going to, Jesus. Jesus is like, no, I want you in the boat. And all of them were like, no, Jesus, last time we were in the boat, the storm came up and you calmed the storm. We need you in the boat in case a storm comes up. And Jesus is like, no, just get in the boat. Promise us a storm won't come up. And I think Jesus is like, I'm not going to promise you anything. And then Jesus makes up an excuse. I don't know if you've ever seen this before. Jesus goes, I got to dismiss the crowd. And again, I think Matthew's like, I can do that for you, Jesus. Let me dismiss the crowd. Peter's like, we can all, Jesus, let us serve you, Jesus. We'll help you dismiss. Jesus, you've taught all day. You're tired. we will love you by serving you. Well, you are Jesus, so not to Jesus. But wait, we're gonna dismiss the crowd. Then Jesus, after we all dismiss the crowd, then you can get in the boat with us. And Jesus is like, no, get in the boat. Now. So they got in the boat. And they started to row to the other side of the lake. And guess what happened? Another storm. Put yourself in that moment. They're like, it's why we wanted Jesus in the boat. It's why we need Jesus in the boat. Now Jesus isn't in the boat. And now what are we going to do? And all night long, Matthew tells us, they try to make their way to the shore. All night long, that storm crashed into that boat. They could hear the creaking of the wood all night long. The rain pelted the side of their face all night long. I mean, they are soaking wet and they are terrified and they're trying to get to shore and they're not making any ground all night long. And the sun just started to come up. And Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. And when the disciples, who again, Matthew is one of them, saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. And they screamed out, it's a ghost. It's a ghost. Now, I get that the storm is raging. I get that maybe it was hard to see, but here's the thing we all know. The more you know someone, right, you just know how they walk. If you're married to someone, you see that person at a distance, you can just tell if that's your husband or wife, right? Your kids, see them at a distance, you can tell. Best friend, you can tell. A parent, like I'll never forget, my dad just had a certain walk, a certain gait to his walk. I could see my dad coming from, such a long distance. I just knew it was my dad. I could just tell. The disciples knew Jesus. But in this moment of panic and fear, all they could get out was, it's a ghost. And Jesus immediately said to them, take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. You see, the presence of Jesus overshadows the power of any storm that you're in. That the presence of Jesus overcomes paralyzing fear, paralyzing anxiety, paralyzing worry. And it's why Jesus said, don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about tomorrow. What does that get you? The what ifs that are keeping you up at night, what does that get you? The what ifs that consume your mind as you're taking a shower first thing in the morning. The what ifs that consume your mind as you're driving to work. The what ifs in your mind as you sit at home. The what ifs in your mind, can it add an hour to your day? Jesus is like, no. Worry about today. My presence is enough for you today. My courage is enough for you today. My strength is enough for you today. Keep focused on today. Tomorrow, we'll get to that tomorrow. And practically in my life, I do not get this right all the time. I'm just telling you, this is what I try to do. As soon as my mind goes through all the what ifs, I just say them out loud. There's power of saying these things out loud. To get those swirling thoughts out of your brain and into open space. And I find myself saying, Jesus, I'm so consumed with this, and this is all about tomorrow. This is all about the things I can't control. This is all about the fear that it's not even real. And then I say, but Jesus, I know your presence is enough for me today. Jesus, I can't control, but today what I can is knowing that your courage and your strength and your presence is enough for me today. Every time my mind tries to swim in the deep dark, murky pool of the what ifs that consume and sends my heart racing, my veins constricting, and my flight or fight response surging. It's like, Jesus, your promise is that your presence is enough for today. 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 It was Apostle Paul who was just pouring his life into a young leader named Timothy. Timothy that got tapped on the shoulder to go lead a church in the city of Ephesus, and they were dealing with wolves outside the church and wolves inside the church. It was devastating to Timothy, devastating to Paul, because the attacks were on Timothy and the attacks were on Paul. I mean, people were just coming at them, ruthlessly coming at them. And it was with this as a framework, as a backdrop, Paul writes to Timothy these famous words. Maybe you've seen these words on the Instagram post. Maybe you've seen these words hanging in someone's house. Maybe these are words you have memorized. But understanding what Timothy was facing within the church in Ephesus, what Paul was being attacked with, within the church, outside the church, Paul says to Timothy, for God has not given us, Timothy, us, both of you, God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but a spirit of power and love and self-discipline. Timothy, we're being attacked. We're being consumed with the what-ifs of tomorrow, and God does not give us a spirit of fear. No. God gives us so much more. A spirit of love, a spirit of power, a spirit of self-discipline. Don't allow your what-ifs to thrive. Don't allow your what-ifs to thrive. Hold on that Jesus' presence for today is enough for you today. Don't be afraid. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for your presence. Your presence over and over again to the disciples. Your presence was enough. Your presence in our life is enough. Your presence. Lord, I pray that we'll take captive every what if that swirls in our mind, that, Lord, we'll hold on to every what if that dominates our thinking, that, Lord, we'll call it out and we'll say out loud that today, God, you've given us everything we need for today. Your courage is enough for today. Your strength is enough for today. Your peace is enough for today. Your direction is enough for today. That you are enough for today, and your promise is that, God, that you will repeat that tomorrow. So, Lord, let's just take captive every what if and celebrate that you have promised to be present in our lives today. Do not be afraid. In your name I pray. Amen.